Okay, I'm gonna get started. So hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for the live from the studio with visual artist and landscape designer Miriam Berndt. Thank you so much for joining us here today. My name is Fauni Barra, and I'm the Public Programs and Residency Coordinator here at Griffin Art Projects. Before we begin, of course, we would like to acknowledge that our work takes place on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, as well as the Stolo nations, to whom we are deeply grateful. As well, we would like to thank the North Vancouver Rec and Culture, BC Arts Council, as well as the Friday Foundation for their continuing support of the residency program. I have a few housekeeping notes before we get started. So if you like to see live captions display for today's presentation, you can enable this by selecting the CC live transcription button at the bottom of your screen. Please note that not all names will be accurate, but we hope that they can capture most of the conversation. We are also recording this webinar, so if you want to check it out later, I will be published with revised captions in our digital archive, where you can also check out past public programs, including artist talks, exhibition tours, and more. I'm going to post the link to our digital archive as soon as I stop sharing screen. And then the last note that I have for you, well, second to last, is that if you're experiencing any technical issues with the Zoom interface, we will also be streaming today's event on the Griffin Art Project's Facebook page, and you can watch from there as well. You can also give us a follow for folks who are watching me over there. Hello. And I'll drop in those two links in the chat right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to share the links with everyone. Just a quick second here. Okay, so as promised, you have the link to the digital archive, and you also have the link to our Facebook right there. And I'm coming back. I just need to say that there will also be a chance at the end of today's presentation for audience questions. So if at any point today you have a question for our presenter, please feel free to type it in the Q&A dialog box, which is right at the bottom of your screen. You may also choose to raise your virtual hand, and I can unmute you so you can pose your question live. But as I mentioned, this webinar is being recorded, so if you choose to unmute yourself, your voice will also be captured in today's recording. So anyways, without further ado, I have the honor to introduce Griffin's first Indigenous Emerging Artist Awardee of 2023, who is Miriam Berndt. So Miriam Berndt is a mixed media visual artist and landscape designer living in snaʔəm, so-called Marpole, Vancouver. Miriam is the daughter of Theresa from the Kahkewistahaw First Nation, Jim of Irish ancestry, and the stepdaughter of Chris from the Six Nations of the Grand River. Miriam's work explores themes of generational healing, hybrid identity, and landscape-based epistemologies. Her multidisciplinary approach explores the use of Plains Cree art forms, using rough construction materials and found objects to express stories of place and experience. In August 2022, Miriam launched her practice, Land-Based Art Plus Design. This practice combines both of her passions, art and landscape architecture, to pursue land-based art methodologies and provide decolonized architecture and planning services. She hopes her work will reveal truth, heal wounds caused by colonial violence, and uncover expressions and innovations that defy the colonial paradigm and promote a regenerative future. So Miriam, please join us today. I'm looking forward to hear your presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Faune. I'll just share my screen. Presentation. Okay. Hey, to begin, I just want to thank Griffin Arts for having me for Fane and Vanessa and Lisa for making me feel comfortable here, and for your dialogue and insightfulness. It's been really helpful to me. This is a completely new experience talking about my art practice. I'm used to talking about landscape architecture, so this is completely new to me, and thank you for joining me on this long weekend. I always like to start presentations by introducing myself. Fane kind of started that for me. I am the daughter of Teresa from Kahkewistahaw First Nation, and Jim of Irish ancestry, and the stepdaughter of Chris, a Mohawk man from the Haudenosaunee territory. I grew up on Haudenosaunee territory, although my matrilineal roots are in Kahkewistahaw First Nation in Saskatchewan. So this collage before you shows these women, the matrilineal line, and we are Bear Musqueam clan, which passes through our matrilineal heritage. Unfortunately, I am the third generation to not grow up on our homelands. My grandmother was taken to foster care system, and my mom grew up traveling all over North America. And it was my mom who started the process of reconnecting to our traditions and roots. She met my stepfather when I was about 3, and with his encouragement and the connections that he had, where we lived in Brantford, Ontario, on Six Nations territory, she began that work of learning, and that's how I grew up, watching her learn teachings and then pass them on to me. And that's kind of how I got into making and doing art and creating objects with my hands. My mom is a quilter, she is a weaver, she's a medicine maker, she's a knitter, and the way that she approaches making is very involved in process. She interacts with it in a really deep way. She has this curiosity where she wants to understand all of the stages. So as a knitter, she has an alpaca that she rents, and she collects its wool seasonally and processes it to create her own wool in which she knits. And these images are images she's like sent to me through text, but showing her medicine making process. And I thought it really embodied sort of what she does and how she does it. So on the left, she's up in a pine tree collecting medicines. On the right, she's processing willow bark. And in the middle is what she makes, salves and soaps. So growing up, I quilted alongside my mom, and I was always into the collage. So for a long time, my creative outlet was analog collage using found images and vintage National Geographics. What I really loved about, and still love about collage, is that a story is revealed to you. It's not as if you know the story you want to tell, or at least how I approach it. I don't know the story I want to tell. It's through sifting through found imagery that the story kind of is revealed. And sometimes those stories relate to personal experience and can sometimes be paired with language and words to create a representation of a more personal experience. So I'm not trained in fine art in any way. The mediums that I use, I learned from my mom or by watching her, and are also influenced by my background in landscape architecture and environmental planning. So for the last 7 years, I've worked in landscape architecture, 5 of which have been in Vancouver, on Cape Coast Salish territory. And I worked at a larger firm designing parks and streetscapes and larger developments. And I started to become specialized in working with First Nations communities, which is when I sort of, this world of land-based and land-first design was really revealed to me, and the power of story and listening to elders and community members talk about place. It became my passion to figure out how to integrate those relational ways of knowing into our process, our traditional process, which is more rooted in objective ways of knowing and in logic and reason. So as Fanny mentioned, last year I started my own practice, which I've called land-based art and design. And I can't see the text I put on here. Here we go. And my practice is rooted in this approach. And for me, what land-based design is design rooted in the power of the land, its power to hold the history of culture and ecology from time immemorial to the present, even into the future. This approach explores history, ecology, traditional knowledge, place-based experience, and ways of being to uncover the story of place. And in landscape architecture, I use mapping and I use community engagement and ethnographic studies and multidisciplinary collaboration to do this process. And a big outlet for me to convey all of those findings has been counter cartographies. And this is a definition I wrote of counter cartographies, but it's mapping that's inclusive of data not typically recognized in Western traditions of knowledge production. And it often combines contrary inputs or dichotomies to synthesize data that's acquired from both objective and relational knowing. So this is a really simple example of that. On the left is a map that synthesizes a lot of different layers. There are Hunkaminam place names, there are historic waterways and shoreline layers overlapped with historic and present industrial zones, overlapped with parks and parcels of land that are associated with grassroots movements in the community on the downtown east side. And taking all of these elements, smashing them together into one graphic kind of conveys one holistic story. And my job as a landscape designer is to take that story and translate it to shape, form, material, and expression in the built environment. So on the right is a concept of that. This is a plaza that's meant for gathering and celebration and teaching and healing. And so it's a very high level concept, and the design has gone a different direction than this since this was initially developed. But using materials, concrete, exposed aggregates with shells and rocks and found objects, Corten steel and vertical planter elements, and even the planting itself, all these things come together to relate to this story of place. And also to serve the needs of the community that will activate that space later. So that is sort of important to convey because my relationship with landscape design has really informed the way that I do art, and mixed media design has been something of an obsession of mine for the last 2 years. Many people during the pandemic found new hobbies, and this was mine. On the far right is an image of where I find these rebar pieces, and I will not disclose the location because it's a limited resource of rebar, I feel like. So anyway, but finding these pieces, they just really sort of spoke to me, and I started collecting them and exploring different ways of using them. So on the left is images of one of the first pieces I made, which I titled Girl Hide. It's a really crude, quilted tapestry strung up in a traditional hide drawing method upon the rebar that is rooted on a concrete footing, a crude pour that I did myself. And since then, these have kind of evolved to have a more distinct aesthetic. And so this is a more recent piece. I started to reference traditional Plains Cree beadwork and the patterns that I was seeing there. I returned home last May to Kahkewistahaw with my mom and my aunt, and we visited museums and galleries, and I was really inspired by these geometric patterns that I saw. And what was really interesting to me is that geometry sort of relates to the agricultural lands, patterns that you see on our territory today. And I just found that completely fascinating. So what I've done here is I've exploded the scale of a beadwork pattern to create a contemporary expression. I really love the use of crude landscape materials, concrete and lumber. And I like my work to show the hand of the maker. So cracks in the concrete and spills and knotted wood and frayed edges. In landscape design, good design is equated to clean design, and a successful place is it's safe and the built elements are very finished. But I also find from my experience, the best landscapes are those that are not so finished that people cannot animate them. So I see error as this space where people can show up and people can relate to an environment, they can relate to art, whether that's in a critical way or a way of feeling seen. So during my time at Griffin, I wanted to explore the combining of these two practices, my landscape design practice and approach, and my personal exploration of art, and my internal processing of that, and kind of smash them together and see what I could come up with. And so my research at Griffin was looking back at my family, and these are just some images that really stood out to me during this process. Landscape showed up again and again as being really important to me, particularly water. And so during my residency, I wanted to start looking at scale and perhaps constructing elements that are much larger than the finite scale that I've been working at. And this first project I want to share with you, I've titled, for now, Mother's Braid. And I was looking at the story of those three women that came before me and the ways in which that they were fragmented due to colonial instruments. And the way that fragmentation has impacted me today, and created a separateness between the generations in our family. So this narrative was sort of running through my head, and I wanted to reconnect us. A song, when I think of them, that comes up for me is Buffy St. Marie's God is Alive, Magic is Afoot. And she does this really fantastic thing with words where she matches them together. Magic is alive, God is afoot. And it's like a collage of words. And I wanted to recreate that magic for us by weaving us back together. And the braid for me represents home. My mom has very long hair, and so I just think of braiding her hair and its texture and its smell. And sweetgrass was her morning smudge. So that scent, that fragrance is really important to me. So this is a miniature that I developed of the braid using fabrics that I already had. My intention is to create this at a much larger scale. This is an image with my hand for scale reference. I'd like to do this on a much larger scale, maybe, a 6-inch diameter for each thread or strand in the braid. I'm just looking for the right fabrics. I want to represent each of these women in the most meaningful and most impactful way possible. So perhaps I'll get it done in the next 3 weeks. We'll see. And the second project I wanted to share with you that I've been working on, I have titled Undertow. And during this process of research and looking at my family and our story and the patterns that have shown up, I kept thinking about my siblings, and we are a very blended family. We all have different parents, but we were siblings, we were together, and we grew up together. And it kind of, my time here has really started to help me to see the shame that I was carrying and coming from a fragmented family. And I started to recognize that it's not a shame that I ought to carry, that I don't have to carry, that this idea that coming from good stock, coming from a good family is one that was put on us, was put on our society, and it's driven by patriarchal systems. And the condition of your family is not directly related to your value as an individual. And in this process, I became more comfortable talking about this, and I started talking about it with some of my friends, and I was surprised to find that for them too, their relationship with their siblings or their parents is not as simple or nuclear as they would portray. So I started to think about debunking this, reclaiming the narrative of family relationships, and reclaiming what meaningful family can be. Because just because my family is fragmented doesn't mean they are not meaningful. They are still meaningful, and we are still connected, even though we are not in contact. And so this piece helped me kind of grieve that. I didn't realize there was grief. The shame had kind of like layered over the grief so thickly that I didn't know it was there. And so this piece was really inspired by that image of us on the Grand River, where we learned to swim and catch crayfish and fish with fishing poles and find rusted cans and smooth, fine rocks. So as 5 kids on a riverbank sort of drove this piece. And initially, the sketch on the left, I saw us each being represented in the tapestry I wanted to suspend over the vertical elements, and I thought I would use patterns or colors to represent each of us. But the idea sort of evolved from there, and instead of us being represented in the movement of the piece, I saw us being represented in the construction of the piece. So there are 5 vertical elements attached to 5 base plates, and these are each of us, and the base plates connect like puzzle pieces. And I feel like it was a way of taking control of the way that we are connected, affirming that we are still connected. And I see the draping now not as a representation as us as individual children, but I see it as a blanket, as a protector. So the image in the middle is depicting kind of my vision. I will be crocheting a like blanket, a mesh blanket from alpaca wool. So it'll be kind of heavy and drapey, and will suspend along the piece that is shown on the right. Thanks for the nods, Fane. I thought it'd be interesting for folks to see the detail that I sent to my pal who ran the CNC machine for me to produce each of these wood elements. I'm really grateful to have friends who have helped me make this larger scale piece a reality. See if this plays. So the last component of the second project that I put together for Undertow is this collage video. And in the video, each child is slowly replaced by a fabric or a pattern. And for me, fabric and textile has this way of eliciting a temporal experience. It creates a Madeline moment. It takes you back to a memory or a place or an object. And so in this collage video, each image of a child is replaced by memory, which is how I relate to them now. And I wonder if other people experience their siblings or other family members in that same way through memory. Yeah, maybe I'll just let it finish. It's still a work in progress too. I haven't really figured out the tempo that it should land at and whatnot, but anyway, that's it. Hi, thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Miriam, you have anything to say before I send us off?
Yeah, thanks everyone for your awesome feedback. That's really cool. And for spending Sunday on a long weekend here with me. And thanks again to Fane. You did a really fantastic job at making this way less scary for me. So thanks.
I'm thankful for your time and all your knowledge and the generosity of your spirit. Very last thing is that if you would like to know more about Griffin, our projects, our public programs, youth mentorship program, you can follow us, or you can rather check out our website, which I just posted on the chat, and you can subscribe to our newsletter by scrolling all the way down and you'll find it right there. And yeah, once again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Miriam. I'll go check in the residency in a little bit. And yeah, I hope you all have an excellent weekend. Bye.